Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our online webinar, Getting Ready to Meet CMMC Requirements. Welcome, and my name is Jing Song, and I am with Hyperproof, and we are hosting this webinar. So glad to have you join us today from wherever you are. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. First is I want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded. And so you can watch it later on demand using the same link you used to register for the webinar. We will also have time for live Q&A during this webinar after the formal presentation. Would encourage us to take advantage of that. And we really want to hear from you. So please just type your questions as they come up into the chat. And our speakers will be happy to answer them towards the end of this program. With that, I would like to introduce everyone to our speakers today. First up, we will have Matt speaking. Matt, welcome.
Thank you.
And so Matt Monroe, he's currently operations manager at Omnistruct, which is a professional services firm that really is dedicated to, various IT compliance frameworks. Matt is an 18+ year veteran of the USAF, currently serving as a reservist. He holds many different certifications from multiple vendors, including the CCNP, CCDP, the ACCP, and the CISSP. Matt leads the Omnistruct operations team in developing and operating oversight programs for NIST, Cybersecurity Framework, NIST 853, HIPAA, HITECH, PCI DSS, and CMMC maturity levels 1 through 3. He has extensive experience working in high security networks for the Department of Defense and is using that experience to guide realistic implementations of CMMC requirements. We also have Josh Bobbit on the line speaking today. Hi, Josh, welcome, and really glad to have you here. So Josh is a Marine Corps combat veteran and cybersecurity engineer with a CISSP and a Bachelor of Science in Information Security Systems. After helping to pioneer a new age of cyber defense in the Marines, he transitioned into the private sector, where he continued to support various Department of Defense, commercial, and three-letter agencies in compliance, accreditation, and other security engineering projects across a wide variety of classifications and requirements. And in 2015, Josh founded Fortified Logic primarily as a penetration testing firm, but then he quickly grew it into a complete managed security services provider with a focus on the underserved small business market. Backed by a team of military and industry veterans, Fortified Logic is providing enterprise-grade security solutions that efficiently satisfy CMMC technical requirements. And so we'll have a 3-part agenda today. The first part is Matt is going to cover some key things you will all want to know about the CMMC. And then what are the top things to kind of think about and consider right now? And then part 3, both of them, they'll also talk about the things that your organization can do in the immediate term to become CMMC ready. With that, I'll turn it over to Matt.
Thank you, JC. So the first item I uncover here is the context and the background on CMCC, where it came from and why it exists. For the longest time, defense contractors were required to perform self-assessments on DFARS 800-171 self-assessments, as indicated in the graphic there. And the problem came to that the prime contractors would do their self-assessment, but then that data they would then enlist subcontractors who would then enlist subcontractors, and so on up to 3, 4, 5 levels of subcontractors. And the level of security on those subcontractors wasn't as good as the prime. And we've seen a lot of theft and loss of government data. So the CMMC program was started to require certification levels for every level of subcontractor and every prime to make sure that the data that's being entrusted to them by the government is being secured and controlled according to the sensitivity of it. They came up with this 5-tiered model here that you see on the screen with level 1 up to level 5. Level 1 is a very basic basic assessment that a majority of the subcontractors will be responsible for maintaining. Level 2 and level 3 are added are more to that. Level 3 is essentially a DFARS 800-171 with an extra 20 controls on top of it. And then as you go further up, those are going to require a lot more controls, almost to a full 853 R4, R5 program at this point. So this has been an interesting evolution of how they're trying to secure data, the government data, not just COI, but also contract data is included in that. So that's where they're heading. On September 29th, there was an interim rule released where the DoD said they're going to take 5 years to implement this, and they're going to, ideally in those 5 years they'll have, I believe it's 129,000 companies certified in the CMC's level. As of 2025 is when they're going to be, all contracts are going to have these requirements on them, and if you do not have that certification level before or at award, then you will not be able to perform that contract. Your company won't be able to. So the next thing I want to talk about is the kind of important things you need to know here are the interim rule, which I talked about, of course, for the DoD, but other parts of the government are already releasing in the case of the GSA STARS 3 contract, or they're beginning to evaluate putting it on all their contracts. So the anticipation is that the entire federal government is going to be using some form of CMCC. And so it's going to be critically important if you want to get those contracts for your company that you prove your compliance through this process. It's going to apply to any contractors that work with the DoD and ideally with the other organizations as well once they release their rulings, with the exception that if you're providing only COTS items, it's not going to be a requirement. And that can be also changed in the future. That's in the interim rule right now, but that's what the status is because it was considered too much of a burden for every company supplying just commercial off-the-shelf items to be compliant. The third item is you won't be able to get just any assessor to come in and verify you. They have a program, the C3PAO program, which is all the certified assessors certified by the CMC CAB, and you have to order that assessment through the marketplace. You won't be able to go directly to a company. It has to be through the marketplace. This is an effort to ensure that there's a fair coverage of assessors and not one company is getting it all. It's going to be monitored by a CMCC CAB to make sure that it's being awarded fairly to all these C3PAOs once they get certified. Now, once they get certified is an important thing because right now the training for this is still in production. It has not been released. It's expected to be released by January or first quarter sometime of next year. And until then, there's 120, I think, provisional assessors who have been granted provisional rights to perform these assessments up until that point. So at this point, there's 200,000 plus companies that are looking at potentially getting CMCC certification levels of varying kinds and about 120 assessors in the entire world. So that's going to cause a significant issue in getting access to an auditor, which is also what pushed the DoD to issue that rule, which phases it over 5 years so they can make sure that this actually gets built up and it's not all of a sudden only these few companies are getting the bids. And with that, since it's going to take a while to get an auditor and get your actual certification level, important thing to know is that CMCC is based on NIST 853. The 17 domains inside of there are the same exact domains that are in the CMCC, all the maturity levels. So if you already have an 853 program, it is much easier to get, once you finally get that auditor in there, you'll be able to do this certification process much quicker. So what can you do now to become ready? Identify the data that you have. That is the most critical part of this. The overall goal of CMCC is securing the data. And if you don't know what you have, you don't know how you're supposed to treat it. So doing a data classification and identifying what you have is a critical part. identifying what maturity level you'll need is kind of hard to do right now because there's very few contracts, only a handful that have been released with security levels and maturity levels rather. But you should have after you have identified the data you have, you should be able to identify the sensitivity of that data and expect if you have sensitive CUI data, more than likely it'll be at ML3. But there's some exceptions to that will be coming out over the next few months. But trying to identify that is the key. I recommend shooting higher than you need just to make sure and be safe. The next step after that is to do a gap assessment. See where you are and compared to 853 low baseline, and see what controls you're missing, what processes you're missing, and start figuring out how to get those processes in place. In a lot of cases, companies are doing the items that are in 853, but they're just not documented, they're not formalized, and they don't keep records of it. And that goes into point 4 is because you can't do a self-assessment anymore, you have to be able to prove that you're CMMC compliant. So it won't be a matter of, just telling yeah, we do that. You need to be able to provide some evidence that you are doing that, and it's according to the policy and according to the regs. So getting all that straightened out before you get to that auditor to your business is a critical part of this, because you don't want to be scrambling through trying to find proof of stuff that you do, you just didn't keep track of it. And then finally, after the gap assessment, you should get a list of corrective actions, what you are doing right, what you are not doing right, or what you're not doing at all, and start working on fixing those so that you can prove to the auditor when they get there that you've got all the items that you need and all the evidence that you can provide to them. It's better off to provide them all the evidence up front. It causes less questions when you're dealing with an inspector or an auditor. So this is the CUI organizational index groupings. CUI, as you can read there, is unclassified information that has to be protected, and these are all the areas. Some of these areas may be surprising to some people who haven't seen this before. For instance, like immigration and tax are things that typically aren't considered CUI in most people, but it is in one of those categories. So if you have data of any kind in that spreadsheet, then more than likely you have CUI, and you should be protecting it according to the DFARS regs now, in case 800-171, and will be required to protect it further with CMMC maturity levels. Now, the gap assessment is an important part of this, and I think the key thing here is to think like an auditor. It's very easy when you're self-assessing to say, oh yeah, I've got that, no worry. But if you weren't you and you were someone coming in with no information in that environment, what would you want to see to prove to yourself that you're actually doing that? Think like an auditor is the key there. Don't just assume they're going to take your word for it. Don't assume that you're going to just be able to say, yeah, we do that. You need to be able to provide proof, and understanding what that proof looks like and making sure it meets all the requirements is a critical portion of doing this gap assessment. If you do it in a way where you're just reassuring yourself, you're not helping the organization overall, because you're still going to have to go through and provide that. So an objective view of your gap assessment is really critical on this. And improving compliance. So most people, when they go through audits or inspections like this, they either have, unfortunately, still a lot of paper products where they kind of drop a folder in front of the auditor and say, here's all the stuff we need. Nowadays, it's getting really hard to do that, especially with the current environment. So we highly recommend using document repository like Hyperproof to actually provide a place for all of your employees to store the data that's proving your compliance. That way it's all in one place. It can be easily modified and exported and do whatever you need to do, even virtually if it's a virtual audit, which isn't going to happen. The virtual audits were originally talked about with DoD, but now everything's going to be an in-person audit whenever that can become available. So having this information in one place that's easily searchable and easily usable is a really important part of this, and makes it a lot easier and a lot quicker when you're going through the audit process. And then finally, the focusing on corrective actions. Once you get that gap assessment done and you identified the holes and where you need to be and where you're at right now, it's important to actually start working on those. Far too often you create a corrective action plan or a list of items that need to get done, and they kind of get overwhelmed by day-to-day work. So making sure these stay top of mind and providing that oversight, that governance and regulatory compliance oversight, is going to be an important part. A lot of companies have usually one or two individuals or a team assigned to just GRC to make sure that everything is getting done accordingly, according to the plan. So that's going to be the critical part. And the control families that I've identified as especially critical are listed here. And those are I consider them especially critical because they relate specifically to the security of the data. A lot of the other control families relate to the physical security of the environments or the personnel security of the processes. But the ultimate goal is to protect the data, and these five are the top of those, and ensuring that the data that you're being trusted with is secured and it's being marked appropriately, and making sure that it's being taken care of according to the regulation. And at this point, I believe I'm handing it over to Josh to talk about how he can how you should be addressing those specific controls with technical solutions.
Thanks, Matt. And just to clarify, JC, are we holding questions till the end? Because I do see a question here, and I could just kind of review what I've seen a little bit.
Yeah, I think it would make sense to answer this question and address it during now, actually, about what is CUI.
So that actually has come up, and the guidance that I've seen so far is that level 4 and 5 compliance will be considered CUI in itself. 3 and below will not, but that could change. That was part of the interim rule as well. So it really depends a lot on what your compliance status is. And if they decide to change that to all of them in the future, that's a potential that will happen, that just stating that your ML1 and all the documentation revolving around that will be considered CUI. But right now it's just levels 4 and 5.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Hello, everybody. This is Josh Bobbit. Thanks for calling in here. I'm gonna go ahead and take over as far as all of the technical controls are concerned. And I just wanted to note, while this is about CMMC, a lot of the stuff that we're going to review here is also applicable to other compliance standards. So it's not like you have to institute individual technical programs if you have multiple compliance standards. ISO 27001, PCI, FISMA, anything like that. A lot of these handle the compliance for each of those. And as Matt mentioned, there is 17 domains. Don't have time to go over all 17 domains, so I've picked just a few that are probably most applicable to ensure that the technical side of your business is doing what it's needed in order to meet that compliance level. I can just breeze over. Those domains specifically will be access control, incident response, risk management, asset management, maintenance, security assessment, awareness and training, media protection, situational awareness, audit and accountability, personal security, systems and communications protection, configuration management, physical protection, systems and information integrity, identification and authentication, and then recovery. So like I said, we could have this last a few hours if we wanted to go through all the domains, but here's just some that we've highlighted now. Me being personally on the audit side and going through accreditation packages and going through specific audits for NIST 853 and seeing all these and seeing where businesses fall. These are the ones that I kind of picked to go over. So I'll start with access control. It's really hard for me to say that this is the most important, because every domain that I get to, I want to say that it's the most important. But this is kind of where it all, excuse me, where it all starts. A number one place that an auditor is going to go through and going to start looking at as far as who has access to your systems and how you are controlling that. So most access control, they're going to be mostly technical controls, and that's going to be your first line of defense for protecting any user level access to your information systems. During a standard 853 audit, which a lot of this CMMC stuff is going to be based on, the technical controls are going to be assessed as it relates to access control functions. Most important from this list is your overall control of all system accounts, enforcement, and the features. Generally accomplished with whatever your company is deploying at the time to do any kind of authentication management for your directory systems, Active Directory, LDAP, TACACS. This can be for Windows systems, Linux systems, network systems, anything like that. But these controls are going to apply beyond just your user level access controls, and they're going to include the system accounts. If you're running scripts in the background, any networking equipment, core routers and switches, and automation accounts, handling anything like that. So it's going to apply all across the board. So proper account management and enforcement is going to be one of the first thing an auditor is going to look for, and they're going to test those through whatever directory system that you have. Going through least privilege and separation of duties. Normally, you would think this is kind of common sense along account administration, but seeing them in practice, it's not normally for convenience standards that it's, some people kind of skip this function, but these are logical ways of controlling the access to only those who require it and who are authorized to view that information. Separation of duties, a system administrator only having an account for system administrator functions, and then having a standard user account to do all of their user functions. This is the number one thing that I've seen that will expose companies to certain malware events, having, let's say, internet access on their administrative accounts. They use that as they normally would as a user, and they go and download something, and then it has full control and administrative rights over the network, and then it starts to spread there. So that's another thing that an auditor is going to look for. Are you separating based on the duty? Is your receptionist having access to stuff that your network administrator were, or a VP level person having the same access as a regular software engineer would? So let's see here. A lot of this stuff is covered in a separate control, but these audit events apply across the board for most technical controls. Let's see here. Auditing the right events. So auditing is going to be huge, just as Matt says, because you need to be able to provide all of the information to an auditor, and they have to be the right events. So going through your Windows systems or your network systems to have that audit ability turned on, you have to go through the list of specifically what they're using and what they're looking for to make sure you're auditing the right events. First things that come to mind is going to be failed logon events, any kind of remote logon events, any kind of privilege escalation that's happening. Standard user gets administrative privileges and things like that. But ensuring you're auditing those right events, so when you do give it to the auditor, they know exactly what they're looking for, and you can give them exactly what is on their list to look at. So I actually didn't cover the audit events specifically, but since we are talking about auditing, and I'll go over a little more specifically about audit functions in a little bit, but these also have to be stored for an organization-defined period of time, which is commonly a year, but in some compliances that could be up to 5 years. No exception to small companies where only 2 admins control everything and have no. So just as a quick answer to your question, if you only have 2 admins and there's no separation of roles, you might both be in administrative roles, but you're also going to be performing certain user functions or using your account for non-administrative. So that's where separation of roles would come in. You would have a separate account as your admin account to do those, have access to Active Directory, have access to your domain controllers and all of that stuff. But if you are using a separate account for your user functions, kind of browsing the internet, checking email and all of that stuff, that's where the separation of roles come in. I would have to look specifically as far if it's just common practice of not having internet access on those, or if it's going to be a new control. But as I mentioned before, a lot of malware events that we've seen in the field have stemmed from admins browsing the internet and doing their normal functions and downloading something, and then that malware automatically having administrative control over the domain controllers and stuff. So we can go over that in more of a little bit. So systems integrity and technical operational controls are going to address systems and information integrity. The ones I chose from this list: malicious code and spam protection, information systems monitoring, and integrity and failure. Let's see here. Malicious code and spam protection mechanisms are going to focus mainly in network and endpoint software and hardware. It's put in place, obviously, to stop any malicious code and spam. A lot of spam protection now is being taken care of by the email hosters, but if you still have that in-house, you're running an in-house exchange or something, they do have network systems that you can put on the perimeter. They also have advanced a lot with spam filtering these days, but spam emails and clicking on links is still the #1 cause and spread of malware and ransomware. So that is a requirement to be put in place to have endpoint systems prevent any of that malicious code or spam. And then also that's going to go hand in hand. Again, I can't cover all the domains, but that's going to go hand in hand with user awareness and training programs. If you do have a certain user click on something, you want to make sure that you are enforcing that. Teach them why that email was wrong and why they clicked on that link, or open that Excel spreadsheet or that PDF and kind of the signs to look for. Another domain not really directly applicable to this, but that's going to go hand in hand with stuff like this. Information systems monitoring. It's mixed in a lot of the other controls, but from my perspective, it's arguably one of the most important and crucial controls to have in place if you're doing so correctly. A lot of companies will be sending their data somewhere, and we're going to cover that in a little bit. That's a requirement for log collection and audit monitoring. You have to send it somewhere to a central location. That's the easiest way to do it. If you want to use that log collection to look for other security related events, but you have to be auditing these systems logs, whether they're from your domain controllers, from your network systems, or your user level endpoints. But in order to collect all of that and use it most intelligently, we have to do something what's called log normalization. Everything that you're going to ingest into your log collection system is going to be speaking a different language. They might be speaking JSON or IBM Leaf format or syslog or something like that, but every single device is going to speak in a different language a little bit. When they're all brought into your systems, in order to have rules applied across the board for everything, you need to normalize them, which means put them all into the same common format. So that's going to be a big part. I'll expand a little bit when we get into the monitoring functions. But the monitoring and detection capabilities, they're going to work in tandem with any automation and endpoint detection software that you have. And they're going to be the first line of defense for any network-related security events. Integrity and failure controls. This is going to be any kind of disaster recovery, alternate site backup systems, any kind of fail-safe to keep the businesses running, because depending on the business that you're in, any few minutes of downtime could mean hundreds of thousands of dollars of loss. Or if you're operating everything on Excel spreadsheets and those get corrupted and you have nothing, that is backing up all of your client information, then that's going to be a nightmare to regain. So this control is going to go over anything that you need to have as far as disaster recovery. If there's a fire, are you going to move to an alternate site? Is everything backed up in the cloud? this essentially is just the BCDR, the business continuity disaster recovery control that you do need to look at if the worst were to happen. And I live in California, and I have personally had to go into an office that I was previously working at and physically grab a semantic ghost backup server and carry it out of the building before it caught fire because the alternate site was not yet functional and the upload speed was too slow to get to where our alternate site was. So we had backups on a single server. It was not set up correctly because it was kind of panic mode whenever that happened. And you don't want to be running into a building that might catch fire because if there's one thing that you learn from any CISSP or anything is they prioritize lives above data. Those of us that work in the field, we probably don't think like that all the time. We like to prioritize data over our own lives. But on paper, that's what it is. And you need to make sure that before that happens, you have those uninterrupted power supplies. You have those generators. You have alternate sites or stuff backed up in the cloud. And then configuration management. Let's see here. Oh, I think this was swapped. So access control. 1 second. So I think this other access control kind of got retitled. It should be going over configuration management. But this is our set of operational controls that are going to address the requirements, the policies, procedures for ensuring that all system changes are properly approved and documented. Your inventory is consistently updated and all configurations are created and maintained with security in mind. This is going to go over things you have like asset inventories, baselines, golden images, software for version control, change control processes and change control boards, security impact assessments, and things of the like. This is essentially to make sure that your admins, while they're trying to meet a time crunch, they're not going to go in and change a bunch of configurations just to go ahead and meet that goal. And now everyone in the company has no idea because those changes were not documented. So if it's a smaller network, you can get away with it a little more. But if you're releasing software, let's say, and you're at some point during the software development lifecycle and things like that aren't noted and approved by an actual change control board, it might work for now. You might be able to release a product, but the next time it comes around, you're going to waste a significant amount of time because no one documented those changes. So configuration management, that's why I pulled it out of this, will save you and the auditor a lot of time. If you know what you have, you know how each individual system has been deployed, what software's on it, if you run a certain baseline version or something like that. But knowing what you have, kind of like a few slides before, knowing what data you have is essentially the start of any solid security program. Thanks, JC, for making that change. Security assessments and authorizations. This is personally my favorite part. Like she said at the very beginning, we were founded originally as a red teaming company. So we were doing penetration testing, tabletop exercises. We'd even get down into physical penetration testing as well, breaking into buildings, trying not to get in trouble, things like that. So security assessments have always personally been most exciting to me. And now they're becoming a lot more important to the compliance standards that are now requiring at least some kind of annual assessment, whether it be vulnerability assessments or full-fledged penetration testing, where someone like me gets to hack into the system and see how far we get and how many permissions we get to obtain or how many hashes we can dump from your server and go crack them. So these are going to be the controls that are aimed at conducting assessments on your network and systems. Like I said, those vulnerability assessments and those penetration tests, but keeping track of those identified risks and vulnerability items, and then setting up continuous monitoring. So it's no good to deliver a report that just says, here's all your risks, have fun, I wish you the best. But providing those reports with suggested remediations and security risk impact, this might look like a high risk, but it includes physical access. So as long as you have physical access and locks and everything like that, this isn't as big of a criticality item as it may seem on paper. Security assessments, they can range in scope from just checking against certain audit controls to making sure you're compliant. They can assess your technical systems for vulnerabilities, or they can be a complete penetration test where, we exploit everything we can on your network internally and externally. This is the whole ethical hacking side of it. Something that we have just noticed here, and not just for CMMC controls, but like I said, a lot of these apply to any standard or any business. A lot of clients or customers or partners, for that matter, have been requesting these security assessments be done before they do business with whatever company they're trying to do business with. So if they're a larger company, like a FedEx or just a large company, and they want to do business with a smaller vendor, they're actually requesting that they give them physical copies of these former assessments so they can go through and make their own risk assessment. Because that's exactly what happened to Target in that large breach a few years ago. They actually got breached through an HVAC vendor. So it was not Target themselves, it was a vendor that they were using and gave them access to their systems. So this is becoming a trend that I have seen personally. And also cyber risk insurance is also starting to require these assessments in hand, just so it shows that you're taking the proper steps and doing your due diligence. So after point-in-time assessments are conducted, because these are point-in-time assessments, you can assess your network one day and it could change the next, whether it's a new vulnerability or a new exploit on your system or a change that you didn't properly annotate in your change management. So all these assessments are considered point in time. You are required to keep track of all your identified sources of risk, whether they be technical or operational. On the government side, it's usually accomplished with a POAM, plan of action and milestones. Have always been the bane of my existence because they're thousands and thousands of lines long and normally done with an Excel spreadsheet. But they are what you put on to address for the future. So if it's a control you're not meeting, or if it's a specific Microsoft patch that you need to address within a certain amount of days, this is going to get added to your POAM, and you're going to put a date that you think that you're going to address it, and this list grows and grows. And I know for some government customers, depending on your contractual obligations, this might have to be a deliverable that you provide once a month, and they're going to keep track of things like that. So yeah, these are essentially running tractors on Excel spreadsheets. I'm looking for any other sources to more easily track these, but they're going to require manually updating every time an item gets updated. Whether you fixed it or you have a new item, it has to get added to that spreadsheet. So using certain platforms, like the Hyperproof platform to start tracking these things in a more time-saving way is going to save hundreds and hundreds of hours yearly. Continuous monitoring is just as important, if not more important, because like I said, these are point-in-time assessments. You have to be monitoring continuously, or you could go a year without knowing that you have a security incident. So new security vulnerabilities and exploits come out every day. That's not just a one-liner, that's 100% true. FireEye, one of the largest security practitioners in this country, just got hacked and all their red team exploits stolen. A lot of those were public exploits, but now they're just being delivered, to a larger group of folks that might want to go out there and try using those tools. But having security assessments completed could have different results week after week. So continuous monitoring systems are pretty much a must-have. System vulnerability scans and assessments should be performed no less than monthly. It depends on what systems you're rolling out and how disruptive they are to the network. But if you can manage them daily or weekly, that would be ideal. But just due to ever-changing dangers, having those done at least weekly. And this could be accomplished through any number of solutions or vendors. There's a lot of programs out there for vulnerability management, whether it's just a scanner that you have on your network, you give it credentials and it goes out and scans every night or once a week all of your systems across the network. A lot of these now use agent-based scanning, where an agent lives on your computers and they already have access to all of your file systems, so you don't need to feed it new credentials. So it's a lot safer there than just throwing these credentials across your network. But if those can scan the system once a week or once a day, that's going to tell you, hey, these are my vulnerabilities. These are the patches that I need to put in place. This software is vulnerable. Adobe products are always going to be vulnerable. So that's probably the number one, Adobe Acrobat and stuff like that. But not only that, they're going to tell us what vulnerabilities you have that actually have exploits that exist in the wild, so we can prioritize those a little more than a patch that is not currently exploitable. And with those tools, you can do a lot of different software inventory as well. Do I have any endpoint antivirus on this computer? Is it up to date? What software am I running, and things like that. Next is incident response. It's going to go over the plan, handling and execution, and testing and training. So incident response is what needs to be in place when you have that continuous monitoring and you are reviewing your logs and you're looking for security incidents and stuff like that. What happens if you have a security incident on your log monitoring system? How do you respond? So this is going to be the organization's ability to act and respond to that event. And it's normally going to be geared towards security events, but it could be geared towards other things as well. You can have an incident response if there's a natural disaster. But from my perspective, this is going to be aimed towards actual security events. So a company must have organization-specific incident response plan that's going to detail what will occur when security events occur, such as a data breach or a ransomware incident. The IRPs are going to live within the IT or the security team as it pertains to reactions to those security events on their monitor systems. With all the auditable events and the data being monitored, which are going to be required by those audit and monitoring controls, you have to have a documented way to handle those incidents, depending on their classification and their criticality. And they're going to dictate how incidents are handled, how you're going to respond, if you're actually going to go on the endpoint and you're going to do investigations and you're going to shut down that ransomware or that malware. Are we going to unplug it from the network to stop it from spreading? How are we going to track it? Are we going to make a ticket for it? And, who's going to address that and things like that. Just covering some of the overhead here. There is about 205 high-level controls because a lot of these CMMC are going to be based off the full NIST 853 framework, and the full framework has about 900 controls. So this is just a small subset of what we're honing in here. But a lot of this stuff, it needs specialized software, hardware, and skill sets that frankly a lot of the small businesses don't have. because cybersecurity engineers, SIEM engineers, they're incredibly expensive now in today's world. And for that logging retention and that collection, the monitoring, the analysis, you need to have a solid security information and event management system, whether that's in-house or it's outsourced. But that's what's going to collect all of the logs from all of your systems, all of the security event audit logs, all of your network logs, or for my case, I like to collect every single packet that goes in and out of a firewall and keep that for a year. So I could say that user X went to this website or downloaded this file a year ago. But this is kind of a little overview of what it might cost. And these are just in California because that's where we currently reside. But a engineer to actually get in there and start developing your systems, they are generally really expensive because it's a full-time job essentially to tune those things to your systems specifically. The same with incident response engineers. These guys have trained for years and years and have experience in how to address security incidents and what to do. Your security analysts, they're just going to be out there watching for events on the network, and they might bring it up to the next tier, or they can handle some low-level systems. And then your watch analyst is essentially just going to be out there who will be the person tracking and recording these on a tickets and then sending them up to an analyst or to an incident responder. But you can see the salaries here. And if you want to have a 24/7, 365 security operations product, you're talking at least 3 shifts, with, at least a few people per shift just to cover outages and stuff like that. So the cost does really add up if you're trying to bring this into your own company here and create a good security operations center product, but that's normally geared towards larger companies. Basic software for this, it can really range. Some products like Splunk are incredibly expensive depending on how you want to use them and how much data you're actually feeding them. But those could be anywhere from $5,000 to over $100,000 a year. Vulnerability management software, the same. You can get just a simple scanner for a couple $1,000, and then you run everything. Or if you pay per asset for a little more, having something done for you, that can range over and above $50,000. But then your basic SIEM software that you're acquiring for that, it needs to be built up, it needs to be tuned, it needs to be enriched and integrated with data threat intel and a whole bunch of other tools to actually accurately detect those security events. So you can see here how if you bring this in-house, it really seems to add up. But these are what those auditors are going to be looking for, that you have these things in place. So we're just kind of looking for the shortest path here to get and meet all of those controls. There you go, Matt. Thank you, guys.
All right, so this is just a quick blurb of our company. We provide the GRC oversight that I mentioned earlier. We run the program. We make sure everything's getting taken care of. We track those POEMs that Josh mentioned and make sure those are getting done. We retain your documents in Hyperproof for future audits. We do the gap analysis, tell you where your faults are. We basically do everything that you would need to understand at first of where you're at and where you need to be, and provide you the documentation and the oversight to make sure you get there.
And then from us as a business, we found it a lot less overhead intensive to use someone else for the actual compliance tracking, because building that side takes away the focus from actual security events. So we work with companies like Omnistruct. We work in tandem with them to provide technical solutions and analysis, because essentially when someone like Omnistruct walks you through the initial gap analysis, they're going to produce what's called a corrective action plan. And then those plans are going to have some operational controls and some technical controls. And we are there to help meet any of those technical controls. We do run a 24-hour a day, 365-day a year security operations center. We use a cloud-based SIM, and we securely collect all of the information on your network with a secure log collector on your network. We had 1-year retention for that information. We can handle cyber incident response if that's what you need. A lot of people, pull that in-house. We also offer that continuous monitoring that I went through with agent and non-agent based vulnerability scanners.
Great. And a quick little bit about Hyperproof. Hyperproof is a software, is a SaaS company. And we were founded specifically because we have seen that there are increasing number of different compliance frameworks companies have to adhere to, like CMMC is one of the newest ones, but SOC 2, ISO 27001, NIST 853, and others, right? And organizations, security and compliance teams are spending so much of their time just in trying to prove compliance, gathering all kinds of documents they need to verify compliance. And that whole process was just really inefficient. So our platform is really built to provide greater operational efficiency so that you could document all of your controls to meet the different requirements and easily collect evidence from different systems and have a single repository or a single source of truth for all of it, so that it's a lot easier for you to be able to pull up whatever your auditor is looking for. And that this is one of the main reasons we partnered with Omnistruct, is that it gives both the end user organization and the advisor, right, who's helping do the compliance work, a single place to collaborate and get all of their work done. With that, I just want to say thank you, Matt and Josh, for being with us today for this presentation. And let's take a look to see if there are any questions from the audience. I don't have any, there aren't any questions so far, but let's just wait for a moment.
Yeah, this is Josh. I know sometimes technical controls, I can get a little long-winded. I could probably talk about these things forever, but I am always available for questions for further technical controls as well. I like to help people out and just be a resource.
Thanks. So Matt and Josh, with that, do you have any kind of last parting words or comments you want to leave with our audience today?
This is Josh. Mine would probably just be that although these technical controls are in reference to the 853 and the CMMC requirements, these do reach further across, as they are a lot of common controls across other compliance. So if there's other things that companies have to meet, HIPAA, PCI, ISO, stuff like that, a lot of these controls are just going to be a lot of the same things. They might be worded differently or looked at differently with different audit controls, but these are going to apply across the board for a lot of different compliances.
Yeah, I agree, and that's kind of one of the benefits I think of using the platform Hyperproof, is that we can link all those different programs together using the same controls. So you're not providing the same information 3 or 4 times for SOC 2, for CSF, for HIPAA. It's all in one place, and you just link the same proof together. But my parting thing is that if you're not sure whether you need to be CMMC CMMC compliant, or if you don't know where to start, my advice is to just start looking at what data you're getting from the government and kind of looking at it objectively. If you think it might be sensitive, it's probably a good idea to start looking at potentially at least level 1 just to make sure and cover your bases. Because as I said, when they start issuing these out at contract award, if you're not the level that's required in the contract, then you won't get it. It'll go to somebody else, and that's something we want to avoid. We want to help you with. So NIST 800-171 is what was in place and still is in place actually for the interim rule. Every contractor is required to do a self-assessment using the 800-171, the DoD assessment frame or methodology, and submit that information into SPRS, the DISA system that's keeping track of it. It's the 110 controls that are derived out of 853. It's a much smaller version, but everybody who wants to bid on any contracts is going to have some level on some self-attestation in that system. I believe, I mean, you can still put it in, but the requirement was November 30th. So if you haven't done your 800-171 self-assessment in the SPRS system, it's probably a good idea to get that started, because that's going to be deciding in the next 5 years before CMMC becomes required. That's what they're going to be using to award contracts out.
Thank you. That's great. Well, thank you, Josh and Matt, again for preparing this information. And I hope everyone on the call that you found at least a few helpful takeaways from our presentation. And as Matt, Josh, and myself have mentioned, if you have additional questions or want to discuss this further, our contact information is listed here. We would love to talk to you. Thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.